This is Umar Ahmed for Rafael TV, proudly sponsored by Everlast. We're in Las Vegas for a huge fight week between Terence Crawford and Sean Porter. A lot of people saying this will be Terence's toughest assignment at any weight class that he is boxed at. Do you go along with that, Dan?
I think that's a reasonable thing to look at. I mean, we don't know what's happened because the fight hasn't occurred yet. If he happened to go in there and won by a first or a second round knockout, let's say, no one's going to say that it was his toughest fight. Crawford himself says that his toughest fight so far. I asked him about this actually after the press conference on Wednesday. We were talking about this fight. In his mind, his toughest fights have been his lightweight title defense against Yuriorkis Gamboa, where he said Gamboa at that time was still undefeated, was very skilled. And that Crawford described himself as still being a little green at that time. It was his first defense. He had some struggles early on. He ended up scoring a knockout. The other fight that he mentions is the Mean Machine fight against Edvis Kavaliauskas. That was in 2019. Again, he won pretty much every round, but he gave him some trouble and ultimately stopped him also, same thing, in the 9th round. But those are the two fights that he identifies as his toughest fights so far. But I think from those of us looking on the outside, of course, Crawford looks to be the toughest fight. This is a guy who has fought everybody, even in the losses he has taken against Brook and Keith Thurman and Errol Spence, all very close competitive fights. The Spence fight, was super close, unification fight. Danny Garcia also very close. Cal Brook I believe it was officially a majority decision. I think that was probably the one where most people thought that Cal legit won the fight. But again, that's several years ago. Point is, Sean Porter, win or lose, has never given anybody an easy night in the office. And I think there's a lot of people that think that he's certainly capable of pulling the upset. So we'll see. I mean, I just know this. I know it's in the welterweight landscape that exists today, particularly with Pacquiao having retired, with Errol at the moment on ice, recovering from his eye injury. It's probably the best fight you can make in the weight class.
Yeah, a lot of people were clamoring for Terence to fight Manny Pacquiao and Errol Spence, and as you said, Pacquiao's obviously retired after that loss to Ugas, and Errol Spence, let's just count him out for the moment with that eye injury. Say Terence is successful on Saturday night, who would you like to see him box next? Let's take Errol Spence out of the equation.
Well, if you do take Errol out of the equation, number one, we could see such a great fight on Saturday that there'd be a clamor for there to be a rematch. You always have to take that into account. I don't think it's going to be a fighter like a Danny Garcia because he has said, and by all accounts, he's going up to the junior middleweight division. Keith Thurman has been off for a while, but even if he wanted to come back, I'd watch that fight against Thurman. I think, though, that Crawford's probably, and this is a top-ranked thing that they've mentioned, and it makes some sense, that a possibility next year, maybe not necessarily in the next fight, would be if Josh Taylor retains the undisputed junior welterweight title. He's fighting Jack Catterall in February, that a pretty big fight in the welterweight division would be the undisputed junior welterweight champion moving up to fight Terence Crawford, who's a welterweight champion and also a former undisputed junior welterweight champion. That would be a pretty big fight, both in terms of here as well as, certainly in the UK. That's one possibility. But what Terence does next is going to really depend on what happens with his contract. I wrote today about the fact that this is in fact his final contract and talked to him a little bit about it. He didn't want to get into it. He says, we'll get into all that when this fight's over, but it's not a secret that this is the last fight on that contract. He did he still had like 2 years left on his agreement in 2018, and right before he signed the deal, or as part of the deal, when he did the deal for the Benavidez Junior fight, which was his first defense as a welterweight champion, did a contract extension. This is the last fight on that contract. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about what's he going to do afterwards. Top Rank doesn't even necessarily want to re-sign him. They talk about maybe we'll work fight by fight because he commands such a big number for his purse that they need to be able to figure out if it works for them economically. And obviously Crawford wants certain guarantees and the ability to make certain fights. So, his immediate future, if he wins or loses, frankly, is cloudy. We just don't know. It's not. He's going to fight. It's just under what promotion and what type of opponent can be made, because the welterweight division for a long time, this, was so loaded with so many good guys. It's thinned out now, right? Pacquiao retired. Danny's leaving the division. Keith, and I view Keith as semi-retired because he hasn't had that many fights recently. Sean is the guy he's fighting tomorrow, so that will be off the table unless it's so great they want to see a rematch. Ugas is there, but I don't know if that generates the kind of excitement for the public, even though it wouldn't be a bad fight. As great as the division has been, it has petered out a little bit. And of course, Errol is the wild card. Hopefully he comes back healthy. He's cleared to train. That would still be a big fight if Terence wins. Him and Spence is a fight that we've all wanted to see for a long time. That's obviously the biggest one, but you and I both know that's not happening next. I would think that would be almost very, very unlikely to be the next fight.
ever, I think, if I'm being honest. Yeah, I think you're right. Obviously, Terence has got some big wins over UK fighters, Ricky Burns, Amir Khan, Kell Brook. So Terence Crawford, Josh Taylor, obviously a massive fight here, but in the UK that would be a massive deal as well.
Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, and stranger things have happened. Crawford, when he won his title against Burns, he fought overseas, and if the money was right and the deal was right, maybe he would even be willing to go to the UK to fight him. I mean, Top Rank has a deal with Sky Sports. They are heavily involved in the Top Rank schedule. More likely than not, though, I would think that would be a fight in America if they can make it. And don't forget also, it's not like Josh Taylor doesn't have other options. Teofimo Lopez, who's the lightweight champion, unified, was talking about, what he would like to do is to, defend the title against Kambosos that he, in that fight that takes place next week. And, if he had his way, he'd love to go up to 140 and challenge for the junior welterweight undisputed title and become a two-weight champion and have all those belts in his collection too. So Taylor is going to have options both from quality top-rank opposition below and potentially above, if Crawford's still around with the company.
We look forward to a great night, firstly, this Saturday night with Terence Crawford and Sean Porter. Dan, let's talk a little bit about the WBC convention. Let's start with Canelo Alvarez. A ridiculous move or a genius move?
A little bit of both. I never saw that coming. I could have saw him going back to light heavyweight. Certainly didn't feel that he was going to do that in the lead up to the fight or the post fight. I thought he would. My personal view was, had he beaten Plant, which he did, that there seemed to be in my mind, and from things I'd heard behind the scenes and this and that there'd be a pretty decent likelihood that he would strike another deal with PBC, perhaps a 2-fight deal, and in whichever order, but Charlo and Benavidez. Charlo first was what I kept hearing, and then Benavidez later on. And that would be that'd be great, right? I mean, who wouldn't want to see Canelo fight Charlo or Canelo fight Benavidez in whichever order it is? I mean, those are two interesting fights, marketable fights, and in my opinion would be entertaining fights. So, and then he comes to the press conference after he knocks out Caleb Plant, and I actually asked him in the press conference, I know you're going to not, he had said, I'm not coming back till May, as opposed to earlier in the year because I need to rest. I've had 4 fights in 11 months. I just want to take a little bit of a break, not too much, but a little break. So, okay, if you're going to come back in May, at what point then will you sit down with Eddie Reynoso and your team and talk about specifics of not when you're going to fight, but who you're going to fight? He said probably not until January. Seemed reasonable. So now the fight's over, press conference ends. I'm looking at his Instagram. He's off, as he had said to me prior to the fight, he's going to go to Paris on vacation with his wife, so they were enjoying their time. And then Reynoso shows up at the at the WBC convention, stands up and says, I want to fight. We're asking permission for Canelo to be the challenger for Makabu, the cruiserweight champion. Now, I don't know if you saw the video. I watched the video on YouTube of that session of the convention, and when Eddie now he was speaking in Spanish, but on YouTube you can do closed subtitles, for different languages. So I'm watching it, and as he's saying Makabu, like you literally can hear the audience gasp. They're like in shock that he is asking for the permission to fight the cruiserweight. Now, my understanding is that WBC is going to drop the limit for cruiserweight from 200 pounds to 190 pounds as part of their creation of the Bridgerweight division. That's a whole different situation. But in any event,
convenient timing?
No, I don't think they're related, to be honest. I think they were always intending to do that. It just so happens that maybe Eddie saw that. He's fought at 175. And frankly, if the Makabu fight is made, I don't believe for a moment that he's going to come into the ring or to the weigh-in at 190 pounds. There's no reason. And I harken back to when I covered Roy Jones against John Ruiz when Roy was the light heavyweight champion, and he went up to challenge John Ruiz for the WBA heavyweight title. John Ruiz was his normal size, probably weighed about 240 for that fight, 230 for that fight. But Roy Jones came to the weigh-in for the WBA heavyweight title. His weigh-in, and he was wearing clothes and shoes and everything. He was like 100, in my recollection, it's a long time ago, 192 pounds, something like that. There'd be no reason for Canelo, who will have the speed advantage, obviously, to weigh 190 or even, I think he could fight that fight in the, closer to light heavyweight and still be effective. And that way, and this is an important lesson I hope that Eddie understands and that Canelo understands, is that when Roy Jones went up from 175 to 192 and fought for the heavyweight title, his next fight he went back down to defend the light heavyweight title against Antonio Tarver. Roy Jones was never the same. He didn't just drop, the 20 or so pounds from, because he was eating burgers and pizza. He took off muscle, and he was never the same after that weight loss. And you would hate to see Canelo pack on the pounds to go win a cruiserweight title, perhaps win it, and then try to cut the weight to get back to 168. And perhaps ruin what's left of already a brilliant career. So they have to take into that account which is why I don't think he would weigh that heavy. But I do think it's a genius move. I've tweeted about this, and I've seen so much criticism. Oh, he's ducking Charlo. He's ducking Benavidez. Fight this guy, fight that guy. I'm like, what is wrong? What is wrong with you people? This guy is, and I know Makabu's not the number one cruiserweight, but he's a very solid fighter. I know he's got the loss to Bellew, which is all people look at, but he's a very good puncher. He's experienced. He's been around. And by the way, he's a 200-pound southpaw with really good punching power. Talking about fighting a guy like Canelo Alvarez, who not that many years ago was a junior middleweight and started his career as a welterweight. So I'm all about history. I love that. I love seeing guys take that chance. The people think that he's ducking Charlo, who I have, and Benavidez, both good fighters, both, guys I've liked watching, guys I've interviewed many times, guys who I know a little bit. Exciting fighters. I'd like to see those fights. But give me a break. Look at the resumes. Canelo is fighting everybody. He's fighting undefeated champion after undefeated champion like Callum Smith and Caleb Plant and many other top fighters, Billy Joe Saunders, and that's just in 11 months. Benavidez is a tremendous fighter, has no resume, really, let's be honest. Charlo had a tremendous resume at 154, but as a middleweight, he's got a solid win over Derenchenko. Does he have another big win at middleweight? Korbov? My point is, if you want to get Canelo, I call it the Canelo lottery, fight each other, earn it. He's not under any obligation to fight these guys. He made a decision, I'm going to clean out the division. He went to super middleweight, he won the 3 titles. And by the way, because he fought 4 fights in 11 months, he got one soft touch in there, which was Yildirim, which happened to be the mandatory, and people are complaining. I'm like, if you want to tell me that boxing's number one money man, number one pound for pound, is going to fight 4 times in 11 months, he's not entitled to take a soft touch. In boxing, you don't fight King Kong every single time. So he fought 3 undefeated champions and 1 soft touch. And now he wants to look to go up 2 weight divisions to try to make history by winning a championship in a 5th weight class against Makabu. Here's the point. He's going to do that. So it's the super middleweight champion it wants to go up and fight maybe like the 3rd best or 2nd best cruiserweight. That's like the same as tell Charlo at 160, you know what, why don't you go up to 175 and fight like the 2nd or 3rd best light heavyweight? So I tell you what, you fight Joe Smith at light heavyweight. That's what Canelo's doing. He's fighting 2 weight classes up against maybe the 2nd, 3rd best guy in his weight class. So Charlo from 160, you go fight the 2nd or 3rd best guy at light heavyweight. Or you tell, David Benavidez, also at 168, you go up to cruiserweight and fight, or don't even go to cruiserweight, go up to light heavyweight and fight a top guy. That's what Canelo is doing. So all the people saying, he's just cherry-picking Makabu. You don't see Charlo going up 2 weight classes to fight the 3rd best guy, or Benavidez is talking about that. They haven't even fought the best guys in their own weight class, for crying out loud. So again, all due respect to them, good fighters, I enjoy them. This is not a knock on them, but give me a break. Don't complain because he's not fighting Charlo and he's not fighting Benavidez next, and he hasn't said he won't fight them. He's going to make history. He is the man in boxing right now, whether anybody wants to understand that or not. He gets to call the shots. And when you're the best and you're the king, they come for your crown. He can do whatever he wants. He brings in the money. They all want to wait around and get that lotto ticket. I say go fight somebody else and prove yourself.
Okay, moving on to another major point from the convention. Another major point from the convention. Of course, Dillian Whyte wasn't ordered to fight Tyson Fury, so that leaves Tyson Fury free with options. Let's just rule out Alexander Usyk and Anthony Joshua for the moment. Who do you want to see Tyson Fury box?
Well, the situation with Dillian Whyte, he is still the mandatory, but and the reasons I don't quite understand, to be honest with you, his team, his lawyers and Dillian have a case pending against the WBC based on the fact that they felt like he was the mandatory and they didn't give him that position sooner. So they had brought that action against him. It's in the arbitration court of sport, I guess. And what I don't understand is why wouldn't they drop that? Because they tell you you're the mandatory. In other words, they put out that resolution prior to Wilder Fury 3 that said the winner of that fight, which turned out to be Tyson Fury, would be obligated to make a mandatory defense against the interim champion, which is Whyte, unless they could deliver a contract for the undisputed fight against Usyk within 30 days. That did not happen. Therefore, you would think that was the fight they would order. But they knew it's not like the action against the WBC from Dillian Whyte's team is something that's new. If you're Dillian Whyte and you want that fight, why wouldn't you just go to the BC, work something out, drop your case in return for a contractual guarantee that you're going to be the mandatory? And so I feel like, unless I'm missing something, maybe, I don't know every detail, it feels like that Dillian Whyte's team is sort of like cutting off their nose to spite their face. Yeah, they want to go through the arbitration process, but the end game is they want to be the mandatory. Well, you already are the mandatory. So I don't really quite understand what's going on with
Is it due to the 80-20 split that was put out?
I mean, that the split of whatever the purse bid would be is possible, but again, there's so much money in that fight. Even 20% is a pretty big number for Dillian Whyte's team. I mean, would you rather have 20% of a fight against Dillian Whyte, or say 50% against Joe Joyce or whatever? Not that that's. I'm just thinking of another guy that's highly rated. Also a good fight and it would generate money, but it wouldn't generate more than the 20% you would get for a Fury fight, which is a mega fight in world boxing as well as in Great Britain. So I don't really quite understand what's going on with that. I would like to see Fury fight Dillian Whyte. To me, if Joshua is fighting a rematch with Wilder, with Usyk, and Wilder is not going to be fighting Tyson Fury immediately. They just fought the third time. So what's the next best heavyweight out there?
Joe Joyce?
Oh, again, Joe Joyce would be a fine fight, but I don't believe that that's a better fight than Dillian Whyte. I think commercially, both in the United States and in Britain, Tyson Fury against Dillian Whyte's a much bigger fight than Joe Joyce.
Bob believes that no one knows Dillian Whyte in the States. Is that just Bob being Bob, or is that the case?
I'd say that's a little bit of Bob being Bob. But I'll say this: a lot more people in the United States who follow boxing know Dillian Whyte than they know Joe Joyce. And again, this has nothing to do with Joe's ability or his potential to be a heavyweight champion. It's just the facts. Dillian Whyte's had many significant fights over his career compared to Joe Joyce. So again, viscerally, when I heard about the prospect of Fury against Whyte, I was like, that's a damn good fight. That's if he's not fighting for the undisputed title against Usyk or Joshua, that's probably the next best fight in the weight class in my mind. I mean, again, if you want to tell me Joe Joyce is the next opponent for him, okay, I can get down with that. Now, I think that's a possibility if Tyson Fury is truly going to be able to take an optional defense while the Dillian Whyte thing plays out. Joe Joyce is not a bad fight. It'd still give Tyson the opportunity if they wanted to have a UK homecoming fight against a British fighter. He is highly rated in multiple organizations. He is an Olympian. He was a silver medal winner. I mean, he's got a lot going for him. And he's got a pretty good pro resume, even with not that many fights altogether. So nothing wrong with that fight. And I think it's a doable fight from the standpoint that Top Rank and Fury and Frank Warner are all together, and Joe is with Frank. So from the promotional point of view and that sort of stuff and the TV network stuff, it's probably not a complicated fight to make. It's just about what's the money going to be for both sides. But I still hope that they do the Dillian Whyte fight. I wouldn't mind seeing that. And I'll tell you another thing they could do. Maybe he gives Otto Whalen a rematch because he wants to stick it to Dillian Whyte for walking out on him. I mean, who knows? I'm just thinking out loud. I'm not saying I'm dying to see that rematch, but it's not the worst fight in the world you can make for Tyson Fury.
And just to close off, Eddie Hearn has talked about pay-per-view for quite a while, and he's made comments recently as well saying that it's too much to schedule. So off the top of my head, obviously we had a Canelo pay-per-view against Caleb Plant. We've got one this Saturday with Crawford Porter. We've got a Tank pay-per-view coming up. We've got Jake Paul and Tommy Fury coming up at $80 each. We've also had that $40 pay-per-view announced for January with Charles Martin, Luis Ortiz. So has he got a point? Is it getting too much in America? Obviously we know in the UK it's at 20 quid normally. Which is about $25. Here it's $80. Is it getting too much?
I think it is. I mean, this fight between Crawford and Porter is $70, not $80. The Canelo fight was $80. The one you mentioned on New Year's Day with Luis Ortiz and Charles Martin is $40. Although I got to be honest, nothing against it's an okay matchup, but the notion of paying $40 for Charles Martin on a pay-per-view, no disrespect, is just mind-boggling to me. And the fights that involve Jake Paul, that is a different audience that they're appealing to, in my opinion. So, and I don't know what the retail price on that fight is. So the people that are buying a Jake Paul pay-per-view are not necessarily the same folks that might be buying Saturday's Crawford Porter fight or, even a Tank Davis fight. The Tank Davis fight, again, I'm not certain what the pay-per-view price is exactly. But the point is, that's a lot of pay-per-views that you see show up on your bill over the next couple of months if you choose to buy them. It's a lot. But again, people, I think, they have a false understanding of that. They think, they're just these greedy boxers and greedy promoters are going on pay-per-view and all they want to do is just gouge us for the money. The reality is if you are the promoter and you're trying to make a cogent business plan and you see, you can't make a certain fight for, unless it's for this much money, sometimes you have no choice but to go on pay-per-view, because how else is it going to get financed? There's no big network is buying the fight. Maybe they'd buy it, but not for that much money. And there's only so much sponsorship is going to cover. They do get sponsors for these fights, but not to the level. This is not the Super Bowl that generates $4 million plus for a 30-second commercial. So you can't put it together for that kind of money. So what's the alternative? It's direct to consumer. If you want to see the event, buy our thing. It's the same thing if you go to buy a live sporting event. You buy a ticket to go to the arena, whether the price is thousands of dollars for a huge boxing event, or a couple $100, or you go to a concert. It's kind of the same thing. I mean, you're not, I say it like this, and I say this as a fan who's bought, a million pay-per-views in my life. I've spent more money on pay-per-view than I could ever count, probably. Here's the point. Nobody is entitled to see a boxing match for free. You got to pick and choose. I mean, if you can afford it, great. If you can't, it's unfortunate. But this is the world we live in. It's a consumer-based world. You have to buy things the same way you're not entitled to have a nice dinner at the steakhouse, or to have that beautiful new sports car, unless you can afford it or buy it. And, seeing a boxing pay-per-view is sort of the same way. You got to pick and choose what you want. I know you like to buy all of them, but I'd like to go and and go to the store and have everything of whatever I want. But you can only buy certain stuff. So if you have 5 pay-per-views coming up between now and January, and you can only pick what you think. I mean, in my mind, it would be certainly Crawford Porter for the top-notch main event. And, the Canelo plan I definitely would have bought, given the historical aspect of it. And then if maybe there's one other.
You had Fury Wilder 3 recently as well, to be fair.
Fury Wilder
3. That was
that's true. I mean, that was to me, that was a must-buy also. Yeah. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. I feel for the consumers. Believe me, I am a consumer. I don't get that ESPN expense report anymore either. So trust me, I know. And for a long time, I didn't either. I bought a lot of pay-per-view before I was covering boxing. So I'm not unsympathetic to those that have to pay the price. But again, you do the best you can. Ideally, if you can find a few people, get together, split the bill. If it's an $80 pay-per-view, you got 4 people over, everybody puts in $20, it's worth it. What else can you do? I mean, pay-per-view is, and Eddie can talk all he wants. Pay-per-view is not coming to an end, ever, in my opinion. And DAZN fills a wonderful void where they can put on some quality fights for a reasonable subscription fee for the year or even for the month. I know they've dabbled or talked about the possibility of them also involving themselves in pay-per-view. I had an interview recently with Joe Markowski who said, yes, that's come up, but by no means has any decision been made. I'll take him at his word. We'll see what happens. But pay-per-view is here to stay. No matter what Eddie says, no matter what DAZN said a few years ago, it ain't going anywhere.
Dan, Rafael, thank you very much for talking to IFL TV. As always, much better to do it in person rather than on Zoom. And we look forward to a cracking night on Saturday. ESPN Plus pay-per-view over here, not on pay-per-view back in the UK. That's live on Sky Sports. Crawford v Porter. Should be a great night.
Absolutely. I told people, they said to me, I don't want to buy the fight. I don't want to buy ESPN Plus. I said, then move to Britain and watch it on Sky Sports.
Thank you, Dan.